What's going on, everybody? Felipe here again with another video. And in this video, as you guys can see from the caption, I'm going to be going over the day and the life of a suppo from second lieutenant to captain. Explaining to you guys what is it that a supply officer does. That is a 3002 ground supply officer in the United States Marine Corps. I'm doing this because you don't really know what we do. Nobody really knows what we do, and you Google this and like nothing. There's no real information of exactly what a supply officer does. Like if you're like researching, if you're thinking about commissioning, you're researching what jobs and what they do. There isn't any exact detail of what you actually are doing in this position. And I'm gonna break that down for you guys. So let's jump right in, and let's start with the property side. So as a supply officer, you're gonna manage property, all the equipment that is owned by your unit. So wherever you go, that is from weapons, the vehicles, the communications equipment. You're gonna property like any like chairs, tables, desks, everything. Like you manage everything that is an asset to your unit. All right, you need to make sure the serial numbers match, the prices match, the nomenclatures match. You need to make sure that your physical inventory matches your virtual inventory. So what that means is that if you physically have this on hand, that it's also reported virtually on your account, like your accounting system, pretty much. And if you have it on your management system, you also have it physically. Because if you don't, and there's that missing link, you're going to be in big trouble. Okay, especially if it's weapons, if it's anything of high value, anything that can be easily that is perforable. And what I mean by that is anything that is easily like stolen. Like you can freaking throw this thing under your shirt, or you throw that thing in the back of your trunk and call it a day. It's gone forever, right? Which happens a lot. And that is like the one piece, the property side, which is a big piece of your time. The second piece to that is your finance side. So what happens is that the military, the Marine Corps has comptrollers, which is your financial managers, right? The people that do the budget planning and do the accounting and all this stuff, but they're not at your level. They're not from the infantry unit to the regimental, which is your two tier, and then you got your division at the top. They are at the division level or above. All right, they don't get sent down to the infantry units, right? They don't get sent down to the regimental units. They'll come and maybe support, inspect, and give you some education, but they will never sit there and do a job. They only do it at the division or higher level. So um, that means that their responsibility falls on you because there's nobody else to do it, and that is your responsibility. So you are designated as you're designated as like the holder of your budget. Like you plan your budget, you build your budget, you do the accounting side, you make sure that your purchases match your accounting system, that everything is getting expensed and liquidated properly. And so they have the cycle, right? The financial life cycle in the Marine Corps is your commitment, your obligation, your expense, and your liquidation. So you need to manage that entire thing for every single purchase that you make, to make sure that you don't violate fiscal law or budget execution. Something they do teach you in the schoolhouse as a supply officer is fiscal law, so that you don't freaking go to jail for mismanaging the government money, and budget execution, right? So you know what you're buying, how to buy it, and you you don't lose your job. Because the thing about being a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain in the Marine Corps in a supply officer capacity is that they're really quick to kind of fire you, especially the second lieutenant, first lieutenant, because it's a high risk position, and they'll just replace you, right? They'll get somebody out of the schoolhouse. They're like, hey, get this guy out of here, or send us somebody else who's already a little more seasoned, who knows what he's doing, because otherwise they just get rid of you. And that happened to a few of my friends, who were also supply officers. Like they kind of didn't make it, and you got to be on your game. If you're going to be a supply officer, you got to be on your game. One of the hardest billets to be as a second lieutenant, first lieutenant. All right. And go watch another video. They call it the trifecta of death: the supply officer, the communications officer, and um, the adjutant, the S1 officer, right? The like kind of admin person. So yeah, those are the trifecta of death. Either way, you got to be on your game if you're gonna be in this role. All right, make sure you don't get fired, you don't mess up the property, you mess up the finances. So you're planning your budget, you're executing that budget, you're making sure your balances match, you're doing the accounting piece, the reconciliation. So those are like the two big aspects of your job: property and budget management, accounting, procurement. You're buying all the stuff that your unit needs. You're making sure you're doing it legally. You're reconciling your funds at the end of the fiscal year, and um, you make sure that your boss's money, the commanding officer, that his money is being spent on the things that are needed to make sure that he is successful, the unit is successful, the companies are successful, and overall, like, you guys are doing the right thing with the money, the property. You're making sure that you're keeping it in good standing. Your readiness of the equipment is in standing. So you're whenever like something breaks, somebody will be like, "Hey, supply, we need these parts." And you need to order these parts. You will make sure you have the budget for those parts. You will track it from end to end supply chain, right? So you will order it, you will track it from when you place the order. It's going to sit on your DASIV, your doing status file, which is pretty much like a list of every single order your unit has placed. And you go line by line. Hey, what's up with this order? What's up with this order? Think of it as like you order 10 things from Amazon and they're all arriving on different dates. As each one arrives, it should be falling off your due and status file. If it's not, you got to find out what's going on. Maybe there's a delay. Maybe you got lost in transit. You need to reconcile that, make sure that you're actually receiving your stuff. If it's not, like, you just incurred a loss, right? Because you may or may not get a refund for that stuff, especially if it's from an outside entity. So, um, just some things that like you gotta do day to day. And you will have a do that they call it DASIV clerk, right? You will have a Marine that does that as his full-time job. Like, he sits there and does every single requisition, every order they've ever made that you've made in your unit. He will reconcile that, right? So that DASIV clerk, that's his sole purpose. Then you'll have a fiscal clerk, the one who's like updating your budget, and you're reconciling like how much you have committed, how much you have obligated, how much you have expense, and how much you have liquidated, right? How much you've spent, how much you have left over. That's like, and they're kind of working hand in hand with you. Um, and you'll have your warehouse clerks. You'll have the ones that kind of manage the stuff coming in. They're making sure that the inventory is getting transferred accordingly in the system. So fiscal, DASIV, doing status file, they kind of go hand in hand. That's like your procurement and requisition, because if it doesn't come in and you got to reorder it, then boom, that's more money on your budget that you need to spend, and then you got to talk to your boss. So you're managing property, you're managing the fiscal side, because you don't have a comptroller to do it for you at that level, right? So you have to step in and do it. You have that responsibility, and in turn, you have to continuously provide those updates to your boss, the commanding officer, because it is ultimately his budget and his property. And if you mess it up, then he's also on the hook, because if it gets out of your guys' unit and above, um, you guys are on the hook, and he's probably going to get beat up by his general or the colonel above him, because your commanding officer at the infantry level, or the that unit level, is a 05 lieutenant colonel. At the regimental level, you have a full bird colonel. At the division level, you have the 2-star general, or so. He is going to get beat up if his books, his property account, or his budget is messed up. Like, he's gonna get beat up. So you need to brief him, or in my case, I would brief him every week. Every week, I was like, "Hey, sir, here's your budget. Here's where you're at. Here's how much you spent. Here's how much you have left over. Here's what we can do. Here's what I recommend." And then the budget, the property side, that's, you don't update him as much on that, because it moves a little slower than your finance side, right? So the maintenance readiness brief, right? This is where, again, you and your team is talking about maintenance readiness, right? Your maintenance readiness and your supply readiness. You're also talking to your boss about um, how the unit is doing as a whole. And so, really, in the maintenance readiness brief, what and who is involved in there is your commanding officer, your executive officer, the S4, the S3 operations motor T, which is part of the S4. You have your communications, your because they manage all the communications equipment. You have your armory personnel, and you have all your company commanders or executive officers for those companies because their equipment is impacted by your performance in the supply shop and your maintenance shop. So there is a maintenance officer who manages the maintenance side, and you manage the supply side. That maintenance manager, if he doesn't do a good job, then it kind of impacts you, right? So you need to have a good relationship with your maintenance readiness officer, your MMO, or your maintenance management officer, your motor T officer, so the one who has all the vehicles, your communications officer, the one who has all the communications equipment, and your armory chief. It's usually a staff NCO, E6 or E5. You need a good relationship with them because they are going to tell you, hey, this is what I need. Hey, this is what I need expedited. This is what I don't really need. We can move this to the side. They're going to also be your subject matter experts in what areas you can save money, you need to spend in. They're going to know publications and what that tells them they can do and their leniency, whereas you are more on the supply side. And unless you learn all of their stuff, it's a little harder to do that yourself, right? So you lean on them. But if you want to be really good, you'll learn their publications as well. You'll know what their orders say and what is your left and right letter limit, and what is their left and right letter limit. Because if you know all this information, then you can tailor it and you don't need to rely on them, and you can speak intelligently and effectively to your commanding officer. So in the maintenance readiness brief, you have like the three companies, HNS and your weapons company. So you have those guys on one side, then you have your S4, your executive officer, your maintenance officer, you have your communications officer, and your armory personnel. So in the meeting, you got about 12 people all briefing the colonel, hey, this is what we need, this is where we're at with our equipment, our weapons, and you go down the line, right? In that brief, you're going to tell your boss, hey, this is what our account's worth. This is what we have spent. This is what we have left over, and this is what we have in the shoe to purchase, and this is what I recommend. Because then he's going to tell you, hey, go ahead and make these purchases for these companies over here who need this stuff, so they can go and train effectively and prepare for the next field operation or whatever is going to happen. And that is your maintenance readiness. Right? You're giving your commanding officer an update on how the account is doing as far as the maintenance and the supply, hand to hand, and your fiscal side. All right. You also have your so so the MRB real quick, it usually happens anywhere like Tuesday or Thursday, depending on where your unit's at and how the operations flow. But at the beginning of the week, you have your startup brief. As a supply officer, you will go with all the company executive officers, so they're all lieutenants. All the lieutenants will go and kind of give the executive officer a brief of, hey, this is what occurred last week, here's what's going to occur this week, and we haven't planned, and if there's anything that you're missing, well, everybody else who's in that meeting with the executive officer, the major, they'll tell you, hey, I need this, or hey, we got this that just got scheduled on Thursday or on Wednesday or something, and then you guys kind of plan for that as well. So that's how you communicate to each other and to the executive officer, so he's aware of what's happening to everybody else. So that's on Mondays. Then we have our maintenance readiness brief Tuesday or Thursday, depending on what it is. And then the last major meeting that you have as a supply officer is your cub or your command and staff. So the commander update brief and your command and staff, it's the same meeting. Different places call it different things. And what happens in that is that all the section heads now at this point get together and they brief the commanding officer on operations, right? What's happening in their shops. And this usually happens every week or every other week, depending on what level of unit you are at. So if you're at the infantry level, it's usually every week. If you're at the regimental level, probably every 2 weeks. And then at the division level, like every 2 weeks. If you're at the installation level, it's usually every 2 weeks, because every other week you brief the next higher level. So at the infantry unit, they like to do it every week, though, because they'll either get a brief from the regimental, they'll do their command update brief with the regimental level, and then they'll come back to your guys's, and then they'll brief you guys, hey, this is what we got going on in regiment, and then that's how they pass the word. So in that cub, the commanding update brief, you as a supply officer, what you're briefing to him again is the same thing that you pretty much did on the maintenance readiness brief, except you're not briefing like any of those little things. You're like, hey, you're kind of big picture, right? You're kind of telling him like, hey, sir, here's what we did this last week. Here's what we got coming up. Here's long term. Here's short term. Here's our money. This is what we're looking to do, and that's pretty much it. You don't go into any of the detail in those meetings. If you do, you are going to get torn up. And trust me, you're doing all the other officers a favor. You keep it short, sweet, and simple. And you're not in there like, I don't know what, and then everybody else is like, holy shit, what is this dude talking about? Hurry up, we just want to get out of here so we can go finish up what we need for the work week, for the work day on Friday, and let's go home early. So those are the three big things as that are going on your day to day and for the week, and that usually occurs every week for your whole time at the infantry or the regimental. All right, now let's move over to relationships. All right, who do you need to have a good relationship with as a supply officer? There's like 2 or 3 people that you absolutely need to have a good relationship with. All right, your executive officer or your commanding officer, either or both, right? Your communications officer and your maintenance management officer. All right, I say the commo because the communications officer usually has the biggest property account. They usually have most of the equipment. They're probably spending most of the money aside from the mortar T, but usually the communications people, and they impact your inspection readiness a lot. So usually a little more, and yeah, maybe the mortar T is up there. So commanding officer, executive officer, your maintenance management officer, and your pretty much the maintenance people. But if you also want to get really good at your job as a supply officer in the infantry unit, at the regimental unit level, then you need to have a good relationship with your company commanders or your executive officers for those companies. Because if they here's the thing, as a supply officer, everyone's going to try to throw you under the bus. They're all going to try to say that it's your fault, that they don't have equipment, they don't have supplies, whatever the case may be. And you need to be on your game, because if they're going to be like, hey, well, I told you this. I was like, you told me, but you didn't give me no documentation so that I can go ahead and place orders on what you guys actually need, right? So building the relationships, they are important. And the last one I will say is the S1, your admin section. Everything that you need to get signed by your boss, you need to route it through your S1, unless you're good at your job and you go directly to the XO or to the CO, and you don't have to route anything through like a chain, right? You kind of just walk up there, hey, sir, this is what this is. This is what this is. You tell him the bottom line up front, the bluff, right? He'll sign your documents. If you have any questions, you answer them, and you move on, right? You streamline your process, because as a supply officer, you can't do a lot of things without his authorization. You will have some authorization to sign on his behalf, but not all the time. So very important that you build these relationships with your XO, your executive officer, your commanding officer, your S1, your maintenance management officer, and your mortar T, your communications. You need to build these relationships as a whole, but definitely the important ones are those S shops that are gonna impact how fast you move in certain things. And really, it's about your reputation. And if you make sure you have a good relationship with your boss, and you show them that you're doing a good job, your XO and your CO, that you're doing a great job, like, they're going to trust you and they're going to get off your back. And the last thing you want is them breathing down your back. The other thing is, when inspections come around, they're going to trust you, and you're going to have that leniency to be like, hey, this is where we're at. You're going to have that reputation already under you. And the only thing is, you can't mess up on these inspections, because when these inspections come around, they're going to test you and they're going to test your Marines. So you got to make sure you're on top of your game and you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing according to those checklists, right? Which isn't that hard. I totally failed my first inspection. Well, not my first one, but my first one at the infantry unit. I failed one category pretty bad, and I had to go to the general and tell him, like, hey, why I messed up. But it all went really well. I already knew what we had done wrong and how to fix it. So when I went up to the 2-star general at the division to tell him to brief him, because our results go up to the 2-star general of that inspection, and I had to sit up there and I was like, "Hey, sir, here's where we made our mistakes. Here's what we've done to fix it, and going forward, here's what we have in place." General like looked down and he was like, "Good to go. Thank you, Lieutenant Gomez." And that was it. So that was my experience failing one of these categories in my inspection. That kind of dropped us below, so we had to go brief on that. But aside from that, after that, I had no issues with inspections. We passed every inspection with flying colors, constantly outperforming the last period. So um, that is, the relationships. And then, like, as you go through these inspections, if you need help, like, those sections and those other people are going to be willing to help you and get you your documentation that you need or whatever the case may be. So definitely um, build those relationships. Make sure you're looking at those publications, those orders, and what Marine Corps orders, what they're telling you that you need to be doing. Just look at the checklist. If you look at the checklist, it usually tells you, hey, what do you need to reference? Super simple. Go back, reference those. Make sure you have your matching inventories. Make sure you have your matching accounts, right? Your finances accordingly. And so, aside from that, um, really what you're looking at for the rest of the week is training meetings, planning meetings, um, reconciling your documents, forms that need to get signed, processed. You're doing your shopping, your procurement. Um, that is really what is taking up a lot of your time, because not only do you have your meetings at your command level, at your unit level, you also have your meetings at your regimental level. All right, so um, which you also have to do your maintenance readiness brief at the regimental level, because they're also tracking every other unit and making sure that the units are doing what they're supposed to be doing, because the regiment is reporting to the division is reporting to higher, right? So um, that is really what takes up a lot of your time, and that is pretty much the day in life of a suppo, right? Like, hey, this is what you have as far as meetings, trainings, everything like that, formations. If you're in the infantry and you're a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, your formations, they're probably going to go at like 6:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning if you guys are doing poorly. Pass the word, and then you guys are, released to your sections, PT on for your own sections, um, go back to work, whatever the case may be. So yeah, guys, I'll wrap up the video with that. As far as like, hey, what you need to prepare for as far as meetings for the week, what you're doing the rest of the week, your trainings, you're building your relationships, you're doing your formations, company formations. Um, but that's pretty much it, guys. The day in life of a supple. It doesn't sound that hard, but guys, it is hard. And if you mess up the property and you mess up the finances, the command, the military, they don't play around with that, because it's taxpayer dollars and it's fraud, waste, and abuse. If you're not abiding by the fiscal law, the budget execution policies that are out there that you need to be abiding by. So, all right, guys, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for another video. And if you like it, comment, subscribe, your experience. If you're a sup or if you worked in supply, go ahead and comment below what you thought. And if you worked with supply, right? Because I know there's a lot of entities that work with supply and they may not have good things to say, or maybe they do have good things to say. So yeah, I'd like to hear that below. Thanks, guys.